Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Insecure season 4. Let's talk about it. So finally, here we are. We've reached the end of the season. I'm actually a few days late. Sorry about that, but I have a lot to say about this season of Insecure. And this will be a season review overall. I will be discussing what happens in the finale, but for the most part, we're just going to be diving into the themes and to the character arcs and the story arcs that occurred throughout the season. And be sure to know that this is going to be a spoiler review. There will be spoilers for season 4 of Insecure. And before we dive into the review itself, I would very much appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel so you can catch new uploads. So without further ado, let's get into my review of this show. So the first thing that I wanted to touch on was the most prominent theme throughout this season, and that was the deterioration of Molly and Issa's friendship. We saw in the very first episode how Issa was speaking to a stranger who we later found out was Nathan, about how she no longer F's with Molly, she no longer talks to her and interacts with her. And after that, all that was left to do is figure out why exactly their relationship got to that point. And so we saw throughout the season all of the nitpicking and pettiness and bickering and passive aggressiveness until that all came to a head at the block party when Molly and Issa finally had their aggressive confrontation that was almost leading to a fight, a full-on fight in front of everyone, which unfortunately ended the block party on a bittersweet note. But after that point, we see that they don't really talk to one another, and Issa in one episode almost heads towards Molly when she sees her from the window of an Ethiopian restaurant, and she's almost going to do it, but instead she decides to back off and she gets in her car and leaves. And it turns out, we find out in the next episode that focuses around Molly and her relationship with Andrew, which we'll get to later on. It turns out that Molly was fully aware that Issa was there and she was ready. She was preparing herself for the confrontation with Issa, only to see Issa drive away, which evidently disappointed her. In episode 9, we see that they finally come together in this heartfelt reunion where they discuss the ins and outs of the breakdown of their friendship and why it is they can't connect with each other the way that they could beforehand, and what are they going to do about it, how are they going to move forward. Oh wait, hang on. None of that happens. None of that they did not discuss any of that. Instead, what we get is a very surface level conversation between Issa and Molly where they're avoiding the massive elephant in the room and just reminiscing about the good old days. They are avoiding the subject of discussion that they know they are supposed to be addressing head on, because they know that it will blow up. It would blow up in their faces. It would be a huge fight, a huge argument, just like the one that we saw at the block party. But it's a necessary discussion that they need to have. It's one that they need to delve right into in order to figure out exactly what went wrong in their friendship, if the intention is to get their friendship back on track. And it becomes very clear at the end of that episode that Molly isn't actually interested in doing so, because for her it's just so hard. For her, it's so hard to get over whatever grudge, whatever issue that she has, and just move on. But ultimately, we do see at the end, in the finale, that they finally get back together under very fishy circumstances, which I will say, in terms of the handling of this whole theme, if I'm just going to analyze that, I wasn't the biggest fan of the way that it ended, because I feel like the build-up to the breakdown of their friendship, first of all, was problematic, because to me, as I said in my previous reviews, they really should have communicated better. And I know that's the whole point, is that they couldn't communicate and that's why their friendship went downhill. But there was never really a reason for why their friendship went downhill. And I guess the reason that the show is giving us is that they just no longer fit together as a jigsaw puzzle. They no longer fit because there were different points in their lives and they were wanting different things from this friendship, and clearly the other friend didn't fulfill the other very well anymore. So that's kind of what the breakdown was. But I personally think that the portrayal of that breakdown was a little bit problematic. I did like the fact that it all came to a head in the block party, like I said before, but then you have this reunion aspect that happens at the very last minute in the finale, showing how when the going gets tough or when they both have boy problems, they come back together again, and that's just not my favorite. I also find it quite bizarre how the season ended on that note, with that kind of cliffhanger of them coming together and talking about the issues that they both faced with the men in their lives, because the whole season for me felt like it was surrounding this issue. It was a very prominent theme and issue and story arc in this season. And so to have the resolution aspect to it be something that just happens, you know, along with the credits was a little bit bizarre. It was a bizarre choice for me. When it comes to the breakdown of Molly and Issa's friendship, what I did enjoy was the aspect of them avoiding at all costs the elephant in the room, because that felt very real. That felt very, very real, because they were reading each other and they were seeing that neither of them wanted to actually delve into it, and they were also not able to read each other very well, which is also a very real thing because of that separation that they had undergone. They were no longer on the same page, and so they were very hesitant to dip their toe into the real problems that they were facing as friends. The idea that once you do have that big fight, what happens then? That's the most difficult part in my opinion, and so to see how they kind of struggled to overcome that was really interesting. I just think that to have that resolution where they finally do come together and they seem like they're discussing the root issues, the root problems of their relationship, the fact that that was at the very end was a little bit of an issue, and the fact that what brought them together was their boy problems was also a bit of an issue, because as I said in one of my previous reviews of this show, the main issue that I've always had with Molly and Issa's friendship is that they always seem to revolve around boys. They always seem to revolve around men, and so as a result you never really got to see their friendship devoid of all of that, just to see how their personalities fit together. And it became very clear during this season that perhaps their personalities don't fit together very well when they don't have issues to talk about with one another. But unfortunately the resolution to their problems seemed to be to give them massive guy problems so they could come together and talk about how crappy their men are. And speaking of the men, let's talk about Andrew for a second here, because I actually think he was 100% in the right. 100% in the right, because the stuff that Molly put him through, absolutely not. And I love the fact that this show, the genius in the writing, depicted the problems that Molly and Andrew had in just one scenario, in one concise scenario. And this happens in the season finale when they're in Molly's work function with all of her work friends and all of the people in her life, and she is introducing Andrew to that side of her life, and she thinks she's being so gracious about it. Like, look, I'm showing you what I am so involved in. I'm showing you what I'm so invested in when I'm not with you. All of the issues that they had surrounding her scheduling, which that was such a problem, but whatever. All of the issues surrounding her scheduling and her prioritization of her work over Andrew and her other relationships, that was supposed to be resolved. In Molly's mind, that was supposed to be resolved by introducing him more and involving him more into that side of her life. And that would have been fine if it wasn't for the fact that she had been so reluctant, not even just reluctant, she had flat out refused to integrate herself into Andrew's life. After what happened during their holiday in Mexico, when they had, of course, that racially charged discussion with Andrew's brother and Molly butting heads, and I do think that Molly was in the right in that circumstance. Andrew's brother was far too dismissive of the racial undertones that were depicted in that whole scenario. Having said that, I do think that Molly overreacted, because she did. She flat out overreacted, but that overreaction, it came from a place of frustration, and it came from, listen, we all know what's going on in the world right now, so I don't think that overreaction was unwarranted. Having said that, I do think there was a better way for them to have both come together and had that discussion and seen each other as human beings and still been civil, considering their relationship, their connective tissue, which is Andrew. But I digress. The fact that after that happened, Molly was flat out refused. She didn't even want to acknowledge Andrew's brother's presence, existence, and that is ridiculous. If you want to have that relationship with him, how are you not even trying to lend an olive branch? How are you not even trying to be a part of his life like that? I don't understand. I don't understand how she thought it would have been sustainable. Like, what? Anyways, that was already a red flag, but I love the fact that all of those like hints to all of the issues that Andrew and Molly had throughout this season, they weren't neglected. They were fully addressed by Andrew, which showed me he was paying attention. Molly wasn't. She was in her own world. I was glad to see that Andrew was in fact paying attention, because for a second there I was a bit worried. For a second there it looked like he was letting a lot of things go because perhaps he wasn't really that invested in the relationship in the first place after the few warning signs that he had the very beginning of their relationship, where Molly was even reluctant to get into it with him. But it turns out, no, he was there. He was fully paying attention. It's just that he has a lot more forgiveness in him. And so he let a lot of those things slide. But in that event that encapsulated all of the issues that they had in their relationship, he just couldn't let it slide anymore. So ultimately, Andrew and Molly's relationship ends this season on pretty much the same rocky ground that it started off with at the beginning of this season. The discussion that they have initially is interrupted by the whole Tiffany situation, which we'll get into in a second. But I did particularly like the fact that Andrew really hit the nail on the head when he asked Molly, what exactly are you upset about when it comes to us breaking up? Like, why do you actually care? Because from what I'm hearing, because she kept talking about how the time that they had invested, the time, oh my God, the effort, the energy, all that hard work, why waste it? It seemed as though she was more invested in, again, the time, the effort, the energy, the fact that she had gotten this far into a relationship, not one with Andrew, but just one in general, as opposed to actually being heartbroken and upset about the fact that she was going to lose him. She was more concerned about all of the other stuff than she was about her relationship to him specifically. I think that very cleverly tied into the conversation that she was having when she was at Tiffany's house a few episodes back, where she was talking about how this was the longest relationship that she's ever been in and how Andrew just got her. But in reality, it wasn't just a case of Andrew just magically getting her. He had his issues with their relationship. It's just that he was more willing to put the work in order to overcome them. But it seemed as though that it was getting too difficult because Molly was so unwilling to meet him halfway. So I very much enjoyed the exploration of Molly and Andrew's relationship, and I think ultimately, whilst it did come to an end, it was a very interesting character arc, story arc for Molly to explore this season, because it led to a lot of important and necessary introspection on Molly's part about why it is that she can't maintain these relationships and why it is that she's so invested into the time that she put into a relationship as opposed to the person that she invested the time in. Okay, so like I mentioned before, now we're going to get into Tiffany's storyline. Now, unlike the other storylines that I've mentioned here, I haven't really delved into Tiffany's storyline in any real detail in my previous reviews, mostly because as the episodes were going on, I didn't really feel like this storyline was developing in a very cohesive and comprehensive manner. The development of this story and the specific themes that it covers was very stunted and sporadic to me. So I thought that I would just see how things went by the end of the season so that I would give my overall thoughts on how this topic was explored. And the issues that are explored here surround motherhood and birth, because of course Tiffany gives birth to her daughter, and so we see that she has a lot of issues that she's dealing with during this time, more so than just the regular old issues of being a new mom. I can only imagine. Here we're dealing with some mental issues, and of course we're dealing with some issues surrounding, you guessed it, racism. So first of all, let's tackle the racism angle of it, because that was very briefly mentioned in this season, but it was very notable. So we hear that whilst Tiffany was in the hospital in labor, she suffered an almost life-ending blood clot. And because medical professionals can be guilty of racial bias, causing them to not take Black women seriously when they tell them about their pain or any health concerns that they may have, Tiffany was at risk of dying, just like the real-life case of Serena Williams and so many, too many Black women out there who are way more likely to die of childbirth because of this racial bias. So that was one social issue surrounding Tiffany's birth that the show covered, again very briefly but very notably. But then you also have the mental health aspect and the postpartum depression that the show also delved into with a little bit more detail. And again, I say a little bit more because it wasn't really a prevalent theme throughout the series, because the show just generally doesn't explore the character of Tiffany or Kelly or any of the other side characters in any real depth in general. And so to give her this kind of story arc with these really important themes that need to be explored in society was a little bit of a disservice to the themes and also to the character. We do see hints here and there of Tiffany clearly not being able to manage being a new mum, not really connecting to her child, having a difficult time taking care of her child. And even though she has that supportive network, she has her husband, she has Kelly, she has her other friends, I'm sure, she's not really connecting to motherhood the way that she thought she may have. And that's an experience that a lot of new mothers have, because of course this is a condition. Postpartum depression is a condition that new mums face. So we see the storyline all come to a head in the final episode, where we see that Tiffany has vanished. She's disappeared. She went out for an evening and then never came back the following day. And so her husband is frantic trying to find her. And so Molly, Issa and Kelly all join him to find Tiffany on this wild goose chase across town. And whilst I do think that it was a very necessary conversation to have, and I did want to see the end point of Tiffany's storyline for this season surrounding her postpartum depression, I think it was a bit of a shame to have it in the finale. If I'm honest, I wasn't a big fan of the fact that they decided to wrap up this storyline in the finale of the season. I think they could have done that in one of the previous episodes, but the finale for me should have focused on Molly and Issa's friendship. There is no real reason why we got the resolution to that entire, again, key storyline at the very end over the credits. There's no real reason why that should have happened. Like, that should have been the main focus of the final episode, along with the stuff with Lawrence, which again we'll get into in a moment. But in the case of Tiffany's situation, I think that should have been dealt with earlier. I think there should have been more time given to it in order to show her more with the actual child. I don't think we actually got a lot of screen time with her holding the baby, because in all of the scenes where she is with the baby, Kelly is there holding and taking care of the baby for her, which I guess was the commentary that they wanted to show in order to depict that postpartum depression, the fact that Tiffany really didn't have much connection with the child. But we needed to see her interact with the child to fully comprehend. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fact that they didn't even include that in there was a bit problematic, and they very much fast-tracked the entire theme. So I was less than impressed to see so much of the final episode be dedicated to wrapping up this storyline. When they do arrive at the hotel and they finally find her, and she's just in absolute despair, and all she says is, "I'm sorry." Like, she doesn't know what else to say because she can't explain what's going on in her mind, what's going on in her mental state, and it's just so overwhelming for her. And all of that is conveyed within minutes because the show has to go on, because so much is happening at once in this finale, that I think Amanda did a good job in conveying that and showing the plight of this character. And I will say, just as a general point, I wish the show would dedicate a little bit more screen time to these side characters. One, so that it could fulfill these important themes that it explores with a little bit more depth and nuance, and two, because the characters are great. I really enjoy the character of Tiffany. I also especially very much enjoy the character of Kelly, and I wish she was more than just a laughing stock in this show. I wish they took her a bit more seriously, because she has the potential to be a really cool, nuanced character. And whilst I did very much appreciate the extra 2 episodes that we got for season 4, thank you very much, I wouldn't be opposed to the episodes being a full hour as opposed to half an hour. I personally think that would give them the time to once again explore those side characters with a little bit more depth, as well as doing some of the main storylines with Issa and Molly and Laura. We'll get to Lawrence, with Lawrence as well, a little bit more justice. And finally, we reached the point, this is the point of no return. This is where we address Lawrence and Issa's relationship. Now, the last time that I did a review for this show, this wasn't something that was on the horizon. I was talking about Issa getting back together with Nathan. I was living in a parallel universe where this end game, this point was nowhere in sight. Nowhere in sight. The way that I was shocked and surprised and bamboozled in the final episodes of this season, I can't even describe to you. So first things first, pre-episode 10, I had come to terms with the fact that I needed to get over my hatred for Lawrence. I needed to get over it, because clearly Issa was trying to pursue a relationship with him. She wanted to start something fresh and new with him, because they still had that bond, they still had that chemistry. And I do think that it was great to see them come together in a more amicable way, and to actually see how their relationship came about in the first place. Because when we're introduced to these two, they're in a very rocky and down place in their relationship to begin with. So it's difficult to even imagine what they're fighting for. So the episode did a really good job of exploring their chemistry, their history, their sense of humor, and their sexual chemistry as well, in order to establish that actually, like, they are a good pair for one another. It's just that the point in time that we met them, they were in a low point in their lives. Having said all of that, I was team Nathan, so I was very disappointed to see that Issa wanted to start something fresh with Lawrence. Anyway, I'm not team Lawrence in the slightest, but like I said, I had to get over that. I had to get over that after seeing that episode, and after seeing them get back together, I had to accept my fate. So I accepted it, and I went along with the flow. So then tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me why I was rewarded for my comprehension, for my cooperation. I was rewarded with punishment. I was rewarded with insult to find out that Condola was pregnant with Lawrence's child. Imagine. Imagine, I already wasn't on Team Lawrence. I reluctantly went along with this entire thing only to find out that I had steered my girl Issa into this direction. I was appalled. I was appalled at myself. I knew I shouldn't have let my guard down. I was like, I knew I should have stuck to being Team Nathan. But no, I let my guard down. I wanted to see her happy. I wanted to see her refreshed and start anew with Lawrence. And now here I am, made a fool out of. I was made a fool out of. I was made a fool out of for giving Lawrence a second chance. I knew I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. So like I said before, I do personally think that the episodes would benefit from being a little bit longer so that we would see more of the interactions between Lawrence and Condola in the first place to get a better understanding of their relationship. But as things stand, I was very impressed to see the way that they constructed that scene where Lawrence tells Issa about Condola's pregnancy, with him telling Issa and then flashing back to her telling Lawrence about her pregnancy, and that conversation just going in and out with Issa asking the questions that are running through our minds in that time. Just in terms of the general construction of that scene, I think it was a pretty clever and concise way of showing two sides of the same coin, with Lawrence finding out that Condola was pregnant and then him conveying that message to Issa. And it really did break my heart to see how this affected Issa, because she was really trying. She was really trying to get back together with Lawrence and start afresh and not make the same mistakes that she did previously. And you could see that. You could see how stringent she was being about being open and honest with Lawrence and being honest with Nathan when he showed clear signs of interest in her still. She nipped that in the bud real quick. She made it very clear to him that she was pursuing a relationship with Lawrence, and even though he made some snide comments about that, they came to an agreement that they could be friends, that they could be civil to one another, which I love. But again, I'm Team Nathan all the way, especially now. But anyways, I do think that Issa showed some high key growth when it came to her relationship with Lawrence, especially like when she finds out that he's going to be moving to San Francisco for a new job, and she's willing to even uproot her entire life and move along with him, which I think is a mistake, but I'm proven right later on. She can handle moving to San Francisco. She can handle some of the history that they have together and working through that. But Condola's pregnancy, I'm not sure. I'm very interested to see how they handle that whole situation in the next season. And I'm so happy that I finally bit the bullet and watched this show after seeing it around for so long, because it's fantastic. And also the comedic elements are still there throughout, even when they're exploring these important themes, especially when it comes to the long-running gag of the show of the season that everyone is watching. And this season's show was Finding LaToya. I will say I was slightly disappointed to see how little we got from that show. Like, we didn't actually get much footage from it, whereas in the previous seasons, especially in that slave show, it was a very heavily prominent series that everyone was fully invested in, including myself. So I was disappointed to see so little of it there. I know that they have some YouTube footage of Finding LaToya, so I'll definitely be checking that out. But overall, taking into account everything that I just said, I'm going to be giving Insecure Season 4 a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Insecure Season 4, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!